Welcome to the Queer Spirit Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Venegoni. Here we have conversations with artists, healers, and activists who enliven the LGBTQ communities and who empower our queer spirits to flourish. My guest today is my good friend, Phoenix Song. Phoenix is a licensed trauma therapist, expressive arts practitioner, certified hypnotherapist, and applied shamanic counselor, serving healers, artists, and spiritual seekers in their own deep healing work. She is passionate about supporting others and reconnecting with the wisdom of our bodies and the earth, taking back our own power and connecting to our own creative and spiritual paths. Today, we talk about the intersection of psychotherapy, earth-based healing, and spiritual counseling. We dive into the idea that queer identity is a path of sacred initiation and the importance of reclaiming your power, or what Phoenix calls the sacred space of me. Find more about Phoenix and her therapy practice at phoenixsongtherapy.com. And to learn more about her new project for offering energy work and healing services, visit earthbasedwisdoms.com. Hi, Phoenix. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
So, Phoenix, I was wondering if you could start out by telling us how you first came to becoming a therapist.
Yeah, so when I was a child, I was really interested in healing and spirituality and the earth. And I used to do this thing where I would go outside almost every day and I had a little sacred space in the back that I had made. And I would, in my own way, pray for my magic powers to come. And I think after that, it became this lifelong journey to explore the healing that I saw in the earth, in the power of the arts, that was so needed by so many people, including myself, and exploring how to do that in the best way possible. I ended up going into the performing arts for a while, and then using that to run groups and to work with queer and trans youth in New York City. Then I moved here and started studying expressive arts therapy, became a therapist, and then I found the place where I actually met you besides CIIS, where I studied expressive arts, the sacred stream, and I studied hypnotherapy and applied shamanic counseling, and currently in the process of weaving all of those things together in my practice.
I loved hearing your story about your childhood and being in your yard. And I'm curious if you would mind sharing with us what praying looked like to you when you said you were praying.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'd love to. So it was really earth-based right from the start. And so I would go and kind of sit on the ground and I would talk to the trees and the grass and the sky and the clouds. And I would feel the presence there. You know, I would feel so held and so connected and so loved, like so deeply loved. And I just spoke to that presence. And I just really believed in that and knew that, you know, there's something so much bigger here holding us. And for me, that's the earth.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I had a tree house when I was a kid, and I also had 2 dogs, and I would go sit alone in my tree house and just like talk to the tree and listen to the wind and play with my dogs and commune with the earth in that way. Do you know what you were hoping for when you said you prayed for your magic powers?
Yeah, I mean, I really, I felt that there was something missing within me. And I knew that to get it back, I had to follow this path and that this presence would help me with that. And so, in my language as a child, I really called that my magic powers, but it was this undefinable essence of myself, of my capacity as a healer, my capacity to be fully embodied as myself. And I knew that I needed that in order to have the connection I wanted with this being of earth and to offer what I wanted to offer to myself and others.
Yeah, again, I can relate with that because for me, I feel like that part of me is more of what I identify as my queerness than my sexuality. And so that's why exploring just the topic in general of queer spirituality is really important and meaningful to me, because I think that in some ways that queerness is a part of everyone, no matter what their sexual identity is, but the way that our culture and society trains that connection with the earth or with spirit out of us in a way. And so that's what I'm sort of hearing you say is like that part of you that was told to shut down or shut off, you were like praying to have that come back.
That's right. I resonate so much with what you're saying. It's like our wildness, our queerness, our essence, our core being. And I think, part of what I feel so drawn and so called to with this work is recognizing so many of us have lost that. It's been trained out of us. It's been taken. We've been traumatized. We've been abused or oppressed. And those parts of us get taken, or we learn to give them away, or we learn to hide or repress them. And having walked that path and continuing to walk that path in my own life, it's such a joy and such a gift to be able to support others in not only calling that essence of themselves back, but even recognizing that it was there in the first place and they can have it.
So when do you feel like your magic powers came back? Or have they? Yeah.
Well, I feel like it's a process. It's interesting because there's this idea in kind of healing and also in spiritual paths that there's a place that you can get to and rest there. And it's so not true. It's not true. We're always healing and we're always growing and expanding spiritually. And so I think just by doing that as a child, I was already calling my powers back. I was building relationship with them. I was taking a stand for myself and saying that no matter what was happening, I was going to keep doing the work to make myself whole and believing in myself in that way. And so I feel like that's been this lifelong process. And, we all get into these situations where we're repeating patterns that have caused us harm that we experienced in our childhood or, in my belief system and in past lives. And, that the repetition of those patterns give us the opportunity to recall more of ourselves again. But if we keep repeating them, they also take more of ourselves away. So, in my life, I've repeated those patterns and had more of myself taken away, and then had to learn more as a healer how to continue to call myself back and how to best protect what I call the sacred space of me. And I think that is something that we're all learning or have the capacity to be on the path to learning.
I'm curious to know what your experience of the sacred space of you is.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting. I know it can get kind of out there, I guess, talking about this stuff, but for me, it's really quite embodied. It's really quite grounded. So the sacred space of me, I think of it as, even if we just start with our bodies are constantly changing. And there's a rhythm to that. There's cycles. And it's not stagnant. When things are stagnant, it's because it's like there's a knot in the system. There's a knot in our muscles. There's a knot in our emotions, a knot in our energy, a knot in our thinking that we just keep going around and around. But unweaving all of those reveals that there isn't an unchangeable me. There's just this space within which I exist. And from that space, I can interact with the world and create and make change. And that requires a lot of grounding and a lot of protection, because we all are kind of learning how to be in the sacred space of ourselves and get lost and tumbled and confused and do all sorts of things to mess with other people's beings, essentially, even if we don't know we're doing it. And, I think of protection. This is something that comes up a lot in my practice, is that there's this, I know I'm kind of veering off here, but I'm going to go with this. There's this understanding of compassion that means, or this misunderstanding of compassion, that it means we have to give and give and give and give, no matter, what someone else is doing to us. And we have to have empathy for the other person. I really practice fierce compassion, or try to practice. I'm learning to practice fierce compassion, which for me says, if you agree to receive from me and I'm resourced enough to give to you, then we can engage in that giving and receiving process. But if you're not going to receive, if you're going to take advantage or mess with the space of me in some way, I'm not going to give. And I can have compassion, which means like heartfelt understanding, basically, for where you're at, and fierceness at the same time that says, I'm not going to enable you to continue these patterns, and I don't agree to it. So it's a way of honoring myself, what I'm calling the sacred space of me, as well as honoring the other person's path by saying no.
Yeah, when you talk about the sacred space of me, it also reminds me of something I've heard from another spiritual teacher, T. Thorne Coyle, who has talked about what she would more call, I believe, self-possession, in a way of being self-possessed by your God self, in a way, allowing your highest spiritual self to become the part of you that you are possessed by in a good way, because it is a part of you, and allowing that part of you that may have been pushed out, or like the magic that you were talking about having lost, of bringing that back into ourselves and coming from a place of being self-possessed and offering compassion from there. And when I think about compassion in that way, I think about emanating love. Like, I'm resourced enough and I have enough extra to give of love and support and compassion and empathy and care in that way. And that I'm going to allow people to take what it is that they may need, but in a healthy way, that I'm not giving more than I can.
Yes, exactly. That's so beautiful. And it makes me think of, there's this other way when we're thinking about bringing, what that teacher's speaking of with your God self, or what we might imagine as our highest self, or, what we might even imagine as our Buddha nature, or our core essence, our most aligned, healed, best self, essentially. That bringing that in also requires us to work on kind of what I see as the patterns in the space of me. So it's interesting. I know we both have studied with Isa Gutierrez at the Foundation of the Sacred Stream, and something she talks about is energetic patterns and how we run energy through these patterns, and that these patterns are shaped and formed from our experiences, from what we've been through and how we've reacted to it. And so it's interesting, we, bringing our highest selves in requires us, if we're fully embodying that and in alignment, to see all of those patterns that we're running that the highest self cannot actually go through. And so it's like a healing path to say, I'm going to bring this highest self in and practice embodying it, because it will reveal where you're stuck. It will reveal where you're, taken over by misunderstanding or misknowing. It will reveal where, all of our hidden places where we feel like, we're grandiose or like the most special, or where we, think that we're going to be the saviors of the world, or we feel like we just want someone else to take care of us and we just want to collapse and be held. And all of those shadowy, sticky places that, are hard to look at and painful, but our highest self is like, it's almost like you're inviting in the sun. It's like you're saying, here, son, show me everything about me so I can love it and I can heal it and I can more fully radiate the sun in this world that so needs it,
Yeah, yeah. So going back to your practice, I'm wondering how we've talked a lot about the spiritual part of it and a little bit about the nature part of it, but how do you bring in the nature part to your therapy work?
Yeah, so I'm really fascinated in my therapy work in the intersection between psychotherapy, hypnotherapy, and earth-based wisdom practices. And I think it can go lots of different directions. But currently in my practice, the way that I do that is, from kind of a psychotherapeutic practice, I'm looking at all of the psychological, mental, emotional knots that people have, and how all of those knots interact with how they see themselves, how they see others, and how they view the world. And then sort of shining a focused light to help them see their own knots and learn how to untangle themselves. Once we start kind of going into that and getting into that, I'll really help folks focus on where those knots are in their body. So where the patterns live in their body, in their posture, in their breathing, in their muscles. And this really grounds that practice. From there, you can kind of open up to spirit and incorporate more of kind of what we've been talking about, connecting with a higher self, connecting with their magic, essentially. And to hold all of that is, for me, the earth. So, for example, I have plants in my office and I have a really wonderful relationship with them. And they do so much to, if we even just think of like a scientific level, to clear the space from toxins, to clear the air. If we think of a spiritual level, they are helping me hold my ground so I can hold the space for clients to find their own ground. And then I am always inviting clients to connect with the plants when they leave my office. We use it as a resource when we're doing guided meditations or hypnotherapy. We always go to a place in nature and really embody the essence of that place. In my future, something I'm wanting to take I'm wanting to take it out of the office and bring it to groups in nature. And I really want to, I've done this in my personal life, but I'm wanting to do it in more of my professional life, to bring folks to connect directly to the earth. Because I think, me doing it in a guided hypnotherapeutic sense, and then also doing it in kind of an assigned homework sense to my clients is one thing, and it's so powerful. And for me to be using the plants and what I experience as the Gaia field or the earth field is amazing and powerful, but I really want to bring people directly to the earth to build their relationship with it, because, the earth holds all of the teachings for us. Like if you want to get honest with yourself, go to the forest. Yeah.
And so would you say that you are an ecotherapist, or you practice ecotherapy or some of the models of eco-psychology?
Definitely. I think that one of the ways that really shows up for me is this connection between spirituality and earth. Like I'm really wanting to take people more out physically to the earth, but the way that it shows up a lot for me is through kind of spiritual ecotherapy within the room. And that also shows up in the earth-based wisdoms, or, what I might call applied shamanic counseling, or what I've learned as applied shamanic counseling. And I know you've talked about this on another podcast, that word is problematic. And that's why I really prefer earth-based wisdom practice. But for many folks, they understand what that is through the lens of shamanism. But, that practice, bringing people into connection to earth-based beings, kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning. It's like a rewilding, like we're bringing ourselves back to that wildness, that queerness, that untamed core essence within us that's so needed.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you are doing this work, and also that people are starting to connect more with nature and go out hiking and camping and stuff like that. I mean, in some ways, great. Selfishly, I wish that it wasn't so popular because, especially here in the Bay Area, I go places and there's just so many people and I just want to be alone and quiet in nature. But
I know.
we're here on the earth to share it.
And there are secret spots you can go to and, little times of day where you can find those pockets as well. Yeah.
So shifting gears a little bit, I know we also wanted to talk a little bit about the topic of initiation, both on many levels, on a spiritual level, on a biological level. And I'm curious to know what are your thoughts about that and how do you work with that with your clients?
Yeah, great. So I'm constantly talking with my clients about cycles, and initiations I view as kind of, huge culmination of a cycle. So cycles, it's really interesting because we're surrounded by this earth and our bodies who are constantly in cycles. And I like to support clients in recognizing that, recognizing where the moon is, recognizing what their body is going through month to month. For folks who have biological makeup that has them bleed every month, to really use that as a marker. It's a real tangible, you can look at that, it's a cycle, you can explore everything that comes up for you. For folks who have bodies that don't bleed every month or no longer bleed every month, it's finding the different rhythms of their bodies, which can be a little more subtle, a little bit more you have to do a little bit more self-inquiry to find, where your energy is peaking. When is it going inward? When are you just wanting to go outward and give everything to everyone and shine your brightest? But if we think of that in the terms of a whole lifetime, right, this becomes a much bigger cycle. But we can go further and think of it as cycles through many lifetimes. And then, you start to get really juicy and fun. But for now, just looking at, one lifetime, we have these big moments where we change pretty fully, or that's this opportunity to change pretty fully. So, we're born, and that's a huge initiation. We go through puberty. That's a huge initiation. We engage in, our erotic energy in a way that's embodied or shared. And that's a huge initiation. We decide if we're going to have kids or not. And that's a huge initiation. And then we die. And that's a huge initiation. But all of those things are these opportunities to recognize and reflect on and explore everything you've created up to that point, to see what knots have been created within you, what's needed to release them, and then to surrender to the powers of that initiation. I have been talking about this, I feel like, forever, because I feel like in the dominant culture in which I'm living in here, or which we're living in here, there's so little to hold these initiations, and actually so much to take all of our power in those initiations. Those moments are chances to rewild, to bring back tremendous amounts of our core self. And instead of getting to do that, oftentimes we lose tremendous amounts of our core self. And then this just escalates from initiation to initiation. So a lot of what I do with clients is helping them focus on the smaller cycles. And then when they're ready, and then when it comes up, go back to those initiatory moments and see what happened. How did people react around them? What happened to their power? What was their relationship to their self? What patterns were being run at that time? And then to use these practices of hypnotherapy or applied shamanic counseling, earth-based wisdom, to literally go back to those moments and to retrieve their power, their soul essence. And, if we want to think about this more psychologically or more in like a scientific grounded way, it's literally just rewiring the pathways in your brain. So when you go through that initiation, if, let's say you're someone with a biology that has you bleed every month, and you start bleeding and everyone around you suddenly is sexualizing you or eroticizing you, you have these pathways now that say, this is dangerous. Growing up is dangerous. Coming into my power is dangerous. And my sexuality belongs to everyone else. And I don't have a clear space of me here. Everyone else has just intruded in this.
Can I add something there too?
Please, yes.
I would also say, particularly for people with those bodies, the people around them might also start gendering them in a very particular way, more specifically than they did before they were bleeding, but can also be challenging for people who don't identify with that particular gender in a way too.
That's exactly right. And so then you are left alone in this huge moment trying to make sense of this change you're going through. And instead of anyone sitting with you and helping you find what it means to you, everyone's putting on you what it means to them. And so then you lay down these neural pathways that say all of those messages, and then you enact that for the rest of your life until you look at it. And so, part of that process is going back to that moment and saying, like, we're going to rewire this. This doesn't have to be about these gendered expectations. And this doesn't have to be about eroticizing something. This is about your power and you deciding who you are and what you want to do with that power, which is so transformative.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad that you're bringing all this up, because another way that I also work with this with my clients and also with my online course is sort of related to neurobiology, but also just people's understanding and uncovering of themselves and their identity is when they come out as queer, and whether that be around their sexuality or their gender identity or some other way that they are different, and they have to start to share that with people who may not have known that or seen that about them. And as you were saying, the way that people start to impose a certain way of relating to them or certain identity or a certain way of rejecting them, that's also an initiatory process that I think a lot of queer people miss out on because of homophobia or, well, I want to start changing the language to queerphobia instead of homophobia, because I think of queer as a more umbrella term, because maybe people are like, I'm okay if you're gay, but I'm not okay if you're trans, or, I'm okay if you're gay, but I'm not okay if you're poly, or something like that. So the way that people can really shut down someone's experience and the way that they might be opening up to power by stepping into that identity of who they feel, who they truly are.
Yes, exactly. And I love that you're bringing that up, because there's this unique situation involved in, what we're referring to here as a coming out process, but really in knowing and aligning with more of who you are and embodying that. And, in this context, around this larger context of, queer identity in general. Like, I really love that as an umbrella term. And there's this unique process that happens there where you have this questioning inside of yourself. You see the dominant culture around you, and you see the cultures that you are born into, which may or may not be the dominant culture, and all of their ideas around gender and sexuality and relationships, and basically how to run your energy and how to shape the space of you. And you feel within you it doesn't fit, like it's not fitting, there's something different here. And instead of, again, there being a way for you to get to sit with that and blossom into your own knowing, you're being put upon by all of these models and ideas that don't fit. And so then this idea, this term of like a coming out process, it's kind of like saying, it's taking a stand for yourself and saying, this is no longer allowed in the space of me. I am drawing the line. and then getting to unpack and unweave and release everything that's been put into the space of you that you don't want, and then getting to fill the space of you with what was there all along, and allow that room to grow and to breathe and to blossom, which it can't do if everyone is busy suffocating it with their own ideas, and you're trapped in that.
And what I also hear you talking about there is the importance of having boundaries and being strong in yourself and feeling okay and safe and resourced enough to set those boundaries. And I think that the work with the connection to nature can really help people learn those lessons around boundaries, because nature is really good about that and really good at teaching those lessons. When we think about just rocks and trees and water and that they all interact with each other, that they really help us understand boundaries clearly.
Yes, they do. It's, we're literally surrounded by the best model for healing, for boundaries, for creation. And it's so important because those of us, who are queer, who are trans, who exist under those umbrella terms, and for folks who've experienced trauma, and for folks who identify with the identity of woman in any capacity, we're so often taught that our boundaries don't count and they don't matter. And, from something so small as being taught that, you have to have a small, cute voice, to something so big as literally being given the message that your life doesn't matter, right? And when we take that in over and over and over again, it can rob us of all of our power and be really hard to understand then where the boundaries are, because we're literally just trying to survive with all of these incredibly harmful to life-threatening experiences. And if you're just trying to survive, it's really hard to have or to even get to know where your own boundaries are.
So Phoenix, can you share with us a person, practice, or experience that has supported your queer spirit to flourish?
Yes. Well, I imagine it's not going to be any surprise to hear that it's the earth. I mean, for me, the earth is totally queer. I mean, the earth is the place that I go always to be held in the fullness of who I am. And for me, being queer is really about claiming that fullness of who I am, how I create relationships with myself and with others, and how I live my life. And I feel like the earth, gosh, I mean, all we have to do is kind of look around to see all of the different ways that the earth does that, and all the different possibilities of expression and being. And I learn everything from that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So Phoenix, where can people find you and connect with you?
Oh, yes. So my therapy website is phoenixsongtherapy.com. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram, also under Phoenix Song Therapy. I am also going to be opening up, or in the process of opening up, a second business called Earth-Based Wisdoms. So that website should be coming early fall, and folks can find me there. Yeah, and they can reach out. I have a blog. They can read the blog and just connect.
Great. Well, I will have those links in the show notes so people can find them there.
Great.
Well, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such an honor, Nick.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's nice to connect around our love for the earth.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Registration is almost open for my new online course, Reclaim the Power of You. If you're a queer identified person who has struggled with old stories that say you're not good enough, not worthy, or broken, then this course is for you. Reclaim the Power of You is a course to help you transform your relationship to yourself and others. Together in queer community, you will learn and experience practices of guided meditation and inner journeying to ignite transformation and personal healing. These potent practices of empowerment are quick and effective ways for you to gain clarity and insight, initiating deep healing mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. I have taught this course many times in person, but this is the first time I'm offering it online. The course begins October 6th and is limited to just 10 students. Registration will open on September 16th, so if you'd like to learn more about the course and be notified as soon as registration opens, head over to the site queerhealingjourneys.com/events and get on the waiting list. That's queerhealingjourneys.com/events. I look forward to guiding you on your journey to reclaim the power of you. To find the resources we discussed today, find the show notes at thequeerspirit.com. And if you enjoyed the show, remember to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. This will help us reach and support more queer people all over. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.